Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hey, I'm Derek Webster, guitar player for Succumb.
And Derek, how would you describe the music of Succumb?
I would describe it as, people say it's just death metal, but I say that, what we try to do is kind of try and find our niche within different crevices of that kind of genre. Um, I think that what I wanted to do was just take a little bit of a blending of different facets and styles that are very influential to me and just kind of blend into one thing. And a big influence for me with this type of music is uh, Australian and Canadian black and death metal. So stuff like Portal, Nuclear Hammer, Conquer, and then trying to blend that with sort of a grindcore and brutal death metal sort of edge, and just see where it takes us from there.
Now, in terms of not wanting to be a typical death metal band or just a death metal band, what does death metal mean to you?
Death metal means, I think that death metal means to me, it means pushing yourself artistically in terms of your physical abilities as a musician, and in terms of just what you can do, trying to explore the furthest reaches of artistic expression within the genre. To me, death metal is limitless. It can be whatever you want it to be. It can be as fast or as slow as you want it to be. It can be catchy. It can be arcane, esoteric. I think that death metal is supposed to bring forth the malevolent energy within you, and use that as a positive outlet for emotions that run within all of us as people. And I think that there's nothing there's like, to me, there's no genre out there that has the capabilities that death metal has.
So you mentioned being influenced by Canadian and Australian metal bands, death metal bands, death black bands.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, for the Australian bands, a big aspect of where their sound comes from is actually the isolation. Isolation in the sense that a lot of those towns are quite far apart from each other, and that tends to make them quite iconoclastic, since they're not being influenced by a lot of other bands in their near vicinity. And with Canadian bands, one aspect, it sounds like a joke, but I've had a number of bands tell me this, is the fact that because they have such long, cold winters, they really have nothing better to do than just play their instruments and get better at their instruments, and that affects their sound. Would you say that there are aspects of living in the Bay Area that has influenced your style or the way that you approach music?
I would say that living in the Bay Area, it has a rich history of pushing the boundaries of metal and trying to find different avenues of expression. And that ranges from, um, just like the birth of thrash to bands like Neurosis, and then even for me personally, a tremendous influence to me was the unique leader scene of the early 2000s, bands like Severed Savior and Odious Mortem. Um, and I think that, like, living in the Bay Area, there's always just this thread of creativity that flows through all the bands. And I think that there's almost like a reputation to uphold there. On the flip side of that, I think that living in a city in an area that's so like hustle and bustle, like San Francisco and Oakland, like it's the fucking rat race. And I think that like living in a world of extremes, of extreme poverty and extreme wealth being juxtaposed together, sort of create this kind of frantic kind of sound that is possibly, very present in our music.
Now, at one point, you guys described yourselves as, or described your music as, death and black metal made by punks. Is
Yeah.
that still true? Do you still feel that way?
Not in the slightest, honestly. I mean, I think that in the very beginning, there was, back in the Cloak days of the demo, if you've heard that, there is a little bit more of a punk influence. But I think that was just mostly just born from our Sherry and our former drummer Nicole were both prominent in the punk scene when Cloak started. Sherry fronted another band called Pig DNA, which was like a very well-renowned band in the Bay Area, very noisy, influenced by Japanese hardcore. And I think that for me personally, I've never really had any sort of link with the punk and hardcore scene. I've always just been, my roots are firmly in the metal scene. And I think that, as the years went on as a band, I just pretty much after the initial demo, I just wanted to, put more of my own stamp on it. I think that like the closest thing to like the punk influence that I have personally just is rooted in the grindcore and power violence scene.
Now, as far as the other members' noise background or noise punk, noise rock background, do you feel that some of that influence is also present in your music?
Absolutely. I think that Sherry's vocal approach is very rooted in that kind of style, and I think that gives us a little bit of our own personality as a band, as opposed to just having gutturals the whole time. Kirk in particular is, I would say, a savant of noise and power electronics and that sort of thing, and he composes all of the interludes and everything on our albums. And so I think that sort of influence does creep in with our sound.
So you recently put out a new album, but before we get there, can you tell me a little bit about the early days of Succumb coming out of the previous band Cloak? Like what brought you guys together and what were your intentions?
So I think that with Cloak, the initial, I think that with Cloak, I had been trying to start a band for so long and to no avail, nothing that really went beyond just kind of like a practice space project. And when I was approached by Kirk and our old drummer, Nicole, they were just like, we want to start a band that, we're influenced by like Dark Throne Blasphemy, Cult of Ghouls, Titan Blood. And so they kind of gave me like a blueprint about what they want. And I was like, sure, let's fucking do that, And that was very much born out of just us going to practice space and just, drinking a shit ton of beers and just going for it and just, just seeing where the chips fell in terms of like songwriting. After the demo, I kind of wanted to, push ourselves more musically. And our former drummer, Nicole, she wanted to kind of stay rooted in more of like a primitive black metal kind of style, which I didn't really want to do. And so she left the band and we got Harry. And we knew Harry because Kirk and Harry worked together at Aquarius Records. And so they were just good friends already. And so we auditioned Harry, and I say audition with heavy air quotes because, as soon as he started playing, we're like, yeah, that's the guy. That's the guy. You know,
He does love his blast.
Yeah, exactly. Like that. Yeah, that's we're like, what are we doing? Like, because I'm also on top of that, like, I'm a huge Slothfag fan, so I just felt that it's incredibly fucking stupid for me. Like, yeah, I'm auditioning to drum from Slothfag, you know. So I was pretty much just like immediately on board having Harry as a drummer. And the funny thing is like when we were writing the debut full length, our self-titled one, Harry was kind of under the impression that like our sound was still gonna be rooted in, like in the Cloak style of what we were doing, and then from then on, I was like, actually, no, this is what we're gonna do, and I want to make things a little more complex, a little more death metal, a little more grind, you know. And he went with it, and we just kind of fired out that first album, you know, and we wrote that after our first jam in a matter of like 5-6 months. And so to me, that just felt like we just kind of like blasted that one out. But yeah, that's how like the first one came together. It was just like we auditioned Harry. He was a great drummer, and we just went for it from there.
Now, did the change in name go hand in hand with the change in style? Did you guys feel that the old name didn't reflect you guys anymore?
We actually changed our name because we found out that there was a band called Cloak on Season of Mist. And we figured, well, they're on fucking Season of Mist, so what's the point in trying to, you know, compete with that? And I initially wanted to name the band Succumb back in the early days. So after like we had like an issue with Cloak, with the name Cloak, I just, you know, went back to the guys. I was like, guys, name ourselves Succumb. You know, like I'm serious this time. So we went with it, and I'm happy that we named ourselves Succumb because I feel like, you know, it's just a cooler band name than Cloak. But I don't think that there was any sort of conscious, you know, decision to be like, oh, this is a reflection of like what our current sound is. I think that it was all just kind of just by coincidence, you know. We were planning on, you know, changing our sound as it was. So the fact that we had to change our name just happened to be a coincidence.
So you spoke about intentionally wanting to move the music in a different direction and not go in the primitive black metal direction that was on some of those earlier recordings. But how much of the change in style was just Harry's drumming, the way that Harry plays drums?
I think that like the way that Harry plays drums allowed me to be able to try out new ideas that not to, you know, talk shit on Nicole's drumming ability, but like, you know, Harry's a very talented drummer, and so having him in the fold allowed me to try out new ideas that I probably wouldn't have been able to try out with Nicole. You know what I mean? And so it was freeing for me from a songwriting perspective that I could throw a little more like complex arrangements and riffs at my drummer, and they'd be able to roll with it.
What's your songwriting process typically like?
I would say that, you know, the songwriting process, like everything begins with just a riff, a collection of riffs, and we just kind of go from there. Like I'll just be at home or in the studio by myself, just coming up with riffs. Then I'll show them to Harry, and we'll just kind of go from there. I'm definitely not the type of modern metal songwriter where I just like compose the whole song Guitar Pro and then just like send it to the guys. Like I like to have like a general skeleton of like what I want to do with the song, and then bring it to the rest of the guys, and then have them put their own little creative stamp on it.
Do you and Harry handle most of the arranging?
Yeah.
So let's talk about the new album. Is it 21 or do you say XXI?
XXI.
Okay. So XXI is the name of the second Succumb album, and it came out on September 24th. Tell me a little bit about your intentions going into this album and what you guys had planned before you started.
I think that like what we wanted to do was to create an album that was a little bit more like immediate and in your face than the first one. I think that the first album we kind of wear um, like our Portal influence a little bit more on that one. For me personally, I guess, but um, I think they're like that creates like more of like a foreboding, creeping atmosphere on the first one, especially with Sherry's vocals, the way they're produced. And I think with this one, we just wanted to just immediately just bash the listener's fucking brains in right from the beginning, as evidenced by the way the album starts with Lil M just full speed right from the get go. Um, and I wanted to just kind of implement a little bit more of like my grind and brutal death metal influence in there in terms of songwriting and just like riff writing and all of that. And so I think that what we wanted to do is just create an album that was just a lot more intense, a lot more chaotic um, than the first one, and I feel like we achieved that goal.
A lot more intense, a lot more chaotic, but would it be fair to say that you also branch out into a few other influences that weren't on the first album?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, I think that's we've had some people say that the end of Grawl kind of has like this militaristic Godflesh sort of kind of vibe to it, which I think is pretty cool. I mean, that wasn't intentional to have like a Godflesh sort of thing, but Godflesh is a band that I definitely respect a lot. So I think that's we try to just kind of throw like more of our influences in there and just kind of blend it in a way that I think in the end creates something that is Succumb.
When did you guys start working on this album, or when did you start writing music for this album?
Man, like probably almost immediately after the release of the first one. I think that the songwriting process was a little bit slow at first because we were just playing a lot of shows. Soma was the first song that we wrote for XXI, and we just kind of sat on that one for a year. And then probably I would say after we finished the Pier on tour in summer of 2018, that's when we really started to just kind of focus a lot more on writing. The bulk of the writing was done between like just throughout the year of 2019.
Now, did COVID set you guys back at all, either in terms of rehearsing or recording the material?
Not really. Honestly, I think that in a way, COVID kind of allowed us to just really kind of get down to the nitty gritty and analyze what we wanted to do. I think that what we were supposed to do was initially our plan before COVID was to play Northwest Terror Fest 2020. And obviously that didn't happen. But we were just sort of like rushing to get to have this album completely done by that period, so we could have Sherry and Kirk ready to go and have the song for them. But I think that like once COVID hit, it allowed us to really kind of take a step back and assess our work and really take our time, because a lot of us had our employment affected by COVID. So it kind of allowed us time to just almost like pretend like Succumb was our job. And we just were practicing so much and just really getting down to the nitty gritty of everything. And it really just allowed us to just go everything with a fine tooth comb. And just get in there before we recorded it. And we recorded it in 2 sessions in January and mid-February of this year. Yeah.
I definitely want to talk about the recording. In terms of the the pandemic causing you to focus on the material a little bit more, uh, do you guys self-edit a lot? Um, do you find yourselves experimenting with different song structures or changing things a lot?
Absolutely, man. I think that there is a couple of songs, and most of the songs that we write are just the product of just like writing a song and then taking a step back, looking at it, and then scrapping certain parts or changing a little bits. You know, I haven't like written a song since the Cloak days of it just being immediately the final product. After we finish it, I think that like what we do is we really do just have like an initial song, and then we just jam it over and over again, and we're figuring out what we like about it, like what can be done better, dynamics, changes, all of that stuff. So there's a lot of self-editing going on here.
Which song on this album would you say changed the most?
I would say that it's a good question, man. I would say that either Soma, because that was the first song that we wrote for the album, and so that one was one that we really just kind of like messed around with a lot, especially like toward like that spacey part towards the end. Like there was like 5 different like versions of that before we just settled on like what we had in the end. And then I would say what was once it was just when we initially wrote it, we're like, I don't like the song, and then the more we jammed it, the more we kind of like started like come together with like different parts and changing certain things. It slowly became like one of our favorite songs on the album.
What can you tell me about the recording of this album? Where did you guys end up going?
We went to the Atomic Garden. We worked with Jack Shirley again. Initially, when we did the first album, his studio was in Mountain View, California, which is just like a little bit north of San Jose. And then this one, his new studio was in East Oakland, and so that was just easy for us because it was just like a 10-minute drive to the studio. So that was pretty cool. I think that like what we did was the main focus for us was really just taking a different style approach to Sherry's vocals. We really wanted to create something that was a little bit less distance and drowning in reverb. We wanted to create something that was a little bit more like blown out in your face. I think that one album in particular that kind of influenced where Sherry and I wanted to go with the vocals was Primal Incinerators of Moral Matrix by Tetragrammicide. And the vocals in that album were just like so blown out and intense sounding. And when we listened to that, I remember we were driving home from practice, we're like, that's the way they got to sound. That's how we got to do it. And so we just wanted to create something that was like a little bit more in your face, vocals wise. In terms of like instrumentation, I feel like Jack is kind of hands off. He's not going to really be like your drill sergeant, kind of like Eric Rutan style producer, where he's going to like make you just do a take like 100 times. But we are on a tight timetable. So if he really like trusts you as a musician and trusts that you've done your homework, and you gotta fucking do your homework before you get into the fucking studio. But he'll be the guy where Jack's more the guy where if you'll be doing something, he'll just say something like, you almost got it, and we'll try it again. But I think that he's it's almost kind of like a very like laid back kind of environment,
So I don't know too much about Eric Rutan except that he was in Ripping Corpse before he was in Morbid Angel, and I can't imagine what it would be like to have to play guitar for that guy and have him tell you that it's not good enough. Do it again.
Oh, I know. He's like one of my fucking heroes because like I'm a huge Ripping Corpse nerd. But yeah, I think that having him behind the glass looking at me while I'm trying to record a lead, yeah, I'd be shitting my pants, bro. Yeah.
so, so people probably know Jack Shirley's work from uh, several Def Heaven albums. He's also worked with Harry's other band, Boston Edge. Uh, was there anything in Jack's body of work that made you want to work with him, or did you guys have a relationship outside of the bands?
Honestly, I think that for uh, for working with Jack, it was mostly just the thing where, um, Jack had worked with Harry before, and Harry said that he was like a really good producer, and I had never been in the studio before, and so I just kind of took Harry's word for it and went with it, and I'm very happy with like what he does. I think that the only thing that I was personally like, really familiar with was his work on the Lycus albums, and I was a big fan of that band. But besides that, it was straight up just me just being along for the ride, man. Just like Harry said, he's a good producer, and I said, I'll take your word for it. Let's fucking do it, and that's kind of how we did it, man.
What would you say he brought to the sound of this album?
That Jack did.
Yeah.
I think that Jack has a very natural, has a very natural recording style, and I think that complements like what we want to do as a band. I think that like something that like I wanted to do was kind of play, more like brutal death metal style riffs and Succumb, but I thought it would be cool to like play that style of riffs, but like not with that, overly perfect quantized brutal death metal style production, and have it just be like a little bit more of a natural sounding thing. And I think that like the meeting of those two worlds works out really well for us.
So is this your second album for the Flenser?
Yeah.
How did they get involved with you guys?
So we got involved with the Flenser actually, because we opened as back in the Cloak days, we opened for Death Heaven at Noise Pop, which is this annual music festival that they have in San Francisco. And it was the lineup was Death Heaven, Boston Edge, and us. And that was a trip for me because it was my third time playing live in general. And our first two shows were just at, dive bars in front of like 10 or 15 people. And then this third show is at fucking Noise Pop in front of like 600 people. and, the Flenser guys were there. And as soon as we finished our set, they approached Sherry and asked us about putting a full length. And we just went for it.
The Flenser is an interesting label. It's not specifically a metal label. I think Wailing Storms is on the label. I'm not sure, but
yeah, I'm not sure either.
But they have a lot of like noise rock and other types of music besides just underground metal. How would you say you fit into the other acts on the label, or is that something that you think about at all?
I don't really think about it at all, honestly. I think that I have like a very insular approach to like what we do as a band. I kind of just exist in my own sort of world of like what I like and what I want to do. If anything, it's kind of like similar to like what you were mentioning earlier about like the Australians and their approach towards metal. This is like they're just so in their own world. And I think that like that's kind of like how I am with the band. I just do what I want to do and just don't really frankly give a shit about like what else is popular out there. I think that if anything, the common link for, you know, or for Flenser bands is that they just have, a lot of them are like a little bit like out of left field. I mean, one band that I feel, you know, the most artistic kinship with is Mastery. And that's just like fucking black metal from outer space, man. It's just it's insane sounding. And I just think that like if anything, that's like the common thread among Flenser bands, that, you know, we're all a little bit out there, you know.
Yeah. So the album is out. Do you guys have any plans as far as promotion? Are you able to play shows or do tours or anything like that?
I think that things are kind of moving a little bit slow out the gate for us in terms of touring. I mean, like we have a few out of town shows coming up, most in the Pacific Northwest, and those are going to be in November, mid-November. We have like a couple local shows lined up. I think that, you know, we're working with our booking agent to try and get something going on the East Coast, because I feel like, well, A, we haven't been to the East Coast yet, and B, I think that judging from, you know, from the feedback that I've gotten, I think that like the East Coast is very receptive to what we do as a band. So I would like to get out there.
Yeah, you're friends with the Piron guys, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We toured with them back in 2018. They're funny as fuck. And they're just a great band, you know?
Yeah. They've been on the podcasts. They are very entertaining.
Yeah. Yeah. Those guys are funny as hell. Like, yeah, it was just like, we went on tour with them. It was just like 2.5 weeks of just like fucking jokes, man. Just jokes.
Cool. Well, yeah. If you see Doug and the guys, tell them I said hi.
Oh, for real, man.
So XXI is out now through the Flenser. Derek, how can people order the album? What's the best way to get it?
So you can get it on our Bandcamp, the Flenser Bandcamp, or you can just go to the Flenser website. That's the best way to do it, man.
And I understand the Flenser have put or have printed a bunch of limited edition vinyl versions. I'm not sure exactly when people will be hearing this episode, so some of those might be sold out. But do you want to say anything about the physical releases?
Yeah. So I mean, we have a couple splatter vinyls and we got CDs. I'm just say there. I'm not a vinyl nerd at all, but we got some cool looking shit. Yeah.
And if people want to follow Succumb online, what's the best way to do that?
You can go to Succumb SF on Instagram.com or Instagram.com. What am I, fucking 50? Succumb SF on Instagram. There you go, man.
And do you guys have like a Facebook or anything like that?
Yeah, we got a Facebook. Yeah, just Facebook. We got Facebook, but I think that like if you want to contact us, slide in our DMs, you know, Instagram is the best way to do it.
Cool. Is there anything else you want to say?
I don't know, kill posers, and that's about it, you know. Just kill some posers.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Derek.